NPR stations. Other contributors include the Pew Charitable Trusts, sharing about the state of housing in America on the After the Fact podcast, available at pewtrusts.org/afterthefact, and the Doris Duke Foundation.
This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins. On the local news roundup, State Senate Leader Phil Berger works to cling to power, filing 4 election protests and asking for a recount. The recount is denied.
We're going to let the normal process play itself out.
Family Dollar announces the closing of its Matthews Distribution Center, cutting nearly 400 jobs. Duke Energy seeks to develop new fossil fuel resources to help it power new data centers. It meets with pushback, but Duke promises this approach will allow them to hold back on rate increases.
They're going to go up much less.
Sycamore Brewing opens with a new owner, a new name, and a banner day. Citigroup Technologies opens a Ballantine office and adds over 500 new jobs. And CMS makes news on several fronts. We'll hear about those developments from WFAE's education reporter James Farrell. He joins us later, but here to talk about the stories I just listed and more is Ashley Fahey, managing editor of the Charlotte Ledger. Ben Thompson is an anchor for WCNC TV. And Ryan Pitkin is co-founder and editor of Queen City Nerve. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Welcome.
Morning.
Morning.
So, ballot counting in the race for the seat held by State Senator or State Senate Leader Republican Phil Berger has concluded on election night. If we all recall, Berger's challenger, Rockingham Sheriff Sam Page, led by 2 votes. With the counting of provisional and other ballots finished, he now leads by 23 votes. This is a 2-county race with voters in Guilford and Rockingham County, and when Rockingham County certified the results, Page called that a victory for himself and the voters.
When you spend more of your time in Raleigh thinking about the operations there, and you forget about the citizens in the district, that's where you drop the ball.
Sam Page speaking with WTVD. Ben, this gets pretty complicated.
It does.
A little tricky. Phil Berger, arguably the most powerful politician in the state for the moment, has filed 4 election protests. Was that before or after the votes were certified?
That was earlier this week. So
Okay.
What you have now is the Board of Elections in Raleigh denying his camp's request to do what would be basically a hand recount of very specific 220 ballots that have what they call undervotes or overvotes, and that it wasn't quite clear. The problem is these recount laws in North Carolina are very strict. There is a specific formula and layout for what happens. And so they denied that because typically the first step in any of this is a machine recount. And so that has happened, that continued, and that finished as of last night in Guilford and Rockingham counties. And that machine recount produced no changes whatsoever to those 23 votes out of the 26,000.
So these 220 votes that he wanted recounted by hand, 217 of them were undervotes, 13 are overvotes. I don't know what that is. What's an undervote? What's an overvote? Do you know?
In some cases, I think a lot of times the overvote is just that there's an overvote, as in it appears there might be more than one vote in a category, and an undervote is that, there might be not a vote in a category. And the next step in this would allow the hand recount that they're looking for, but it would just be of a random selection of 3% of the votes. The problem is for one, they wanted to jump ahead of that machine recount by saying, hey, let's save everybody time. Why not? That's just not the way it works. They've got to do the machine recount. So now the next step would be Berger Camp has to decide by this afternoon, do they want that partial hand recount? But again, this is the difference here. That's just a random selection of 3% of the votes. It is not the specific 220 ballots that they were looking for.
And you mentioned that state law prohibits the kind of recount that Phil Berger wanted them to do prior to the machine recount, which they were going to do anyway. It was already on the books. It was scheduled to be done, and it was, in fact, done yesterday. And the State Board of Elections' newest member, Angela Hawkins, who filled the seat of recently departed Bob Russo, made the point that it's simply not possible to do what he asked.
It can't be done in the state of North Carolina. We don't address those.
So the State Board of Elections declined to take action on Berger's request for a hand recount, noting that the machine recount process is standard operating procedure, and that is what would be followed.
We're going to let the normal process play itself out and not do anything special.
Siobhan Milan with the State Board of Elections. Evidently, Berger still has this other option of this hand recount of randomly selected ballots, which I think you said was about 3%. Yeah. When is that likely to happen, and will that likely change the outcome of this?
To your last question, it doesn't look like that. Mm-hmm. There's that. You've got a couple of different things happening at the same time. You've got that, and then also there were some what's being called registration errors on 13 ballots. This is also an outstanding thing. And the Berger has filed election protests on those 13 ballots. There's, I believe, 8 in Guilford County and there's 5 in Rockingham County, which goes to, the point of those goes to whether or not the registration was correct in those ballots. Those local county election boards have granted a hearing on those two things. The problem is, in Rockingham County, that wouldn't be until March 27th. And in Guilford County, that wouldn't be till April 6th. Even though, so that puts us at April 6th before we know something, even though, say those all go in his direction, that still would not be enough to, in and of itself, change the outcome. So if you're on, Team Berger, you've got to hope that, for one, by this afternoon, they've got to say, hey, we want this 3% of randomly selected partial hand recount, and then hope that goes in your way and that it shows a big enough difference, because only after that can they get a full hand recount. That looks like probably his best option at this point.
So if it doesn't, if the random recounting of the 3% by hand, that does not change the outcome, does that end this, or will he continue to try to find ways to find a path to victory here? Is this going to be a repeat of the Jefferson Griffin, Allison Riggs contest?
I think the biggest deciding factor on that would be more lawsuits. If there are more lawsuits filed, just even outside the electoral process, going through legal channels, if he wants to pursue more legal options, that would prolong this.
Okay. Kristi Noem may be gone from Homeland Security, and Greg Bovino, who was both in Minneapolis and Charlotte, leading Border Patrol efforts, may also be gone and retired from that organization. But still, ICE efforts in Charlotte are ongoing, and social media posts suggest an uptick in ICE traffic stops here over the last few weeks. The Carolina Migrant Network reports calls to their helpline have doubled in recent weeks. What else do we know, Ryan, about that? Turn your mic on, Ryan.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, that is pretty much what we do know in terms of it's really tough to get numbers down when you have this police force that's sort of operating without any respect for media or documentation or reporting their numbers. As far as arrests, we go by Carolina Migrant Network has their hotline, and that's sort of how a lot of people rate the activity around the city. But yeah, this is just something that's important to remember, is that ICE is headquartered in Charlotte, down in South Charlotte. They do have a headquarters there, and they've operated here since long before CBP was here for Charlotte's Web, and they will continue to operate here as time goes on. It's not a sense of, it's not always a thing about CBP returning or not. It's ICE will always be carrying out federal law enforcement here.
Mary Jose Espinosa is with the Carolina Migrant Network. She kind of emphasizes that as well.
Since Charlotte's Web, CBP is supposed to have left, but we are still continuing to see enforcement by ICE agents. Again, ICE is always here, has always been here.
And that pretty much mirrors what ICE and Border Patrol promised about their operations once Charlotte's Web wound down. How many people have been pulled over in recent weeks? Do we have a number on that, Ben or Ryan? Do we have a number? No? When I say the number of calls to their helpline has doubled, do we know what that means? Is that a big number, a small number?
Carolina, yeah, they've been holding this hotline since the first Trump administration. I would say I had them on my podcast 2 weeks ago, and they had said that calls were still coming in regularly. So to say it tripled now has got to be dozens per day for sure, and hundreds per week at this point.
And the ICE, again, ICE is approaching people in unmarked cars, but those cars, some of them at least, have practical or your typical police flashing lights, the red and blue lights, and also some have sirens. How is the Carolina Migrant Network suggesting people respond if they are pulled over?
They're telling people.
Go ahead, Ben.
They're telling people to, for one, be aware this is happening. For two, also know your rights. Have any documentation ready. Have your cell phone ready to document what's happening, to record it, and also they're recommending the tip line we're talking about, to have that at the ready to make sure you call as soon as possible, because that's, to Ryan's point, in our business, in our industry, we try to base this stuff off hard facts and data and things like that. And it's just hard right now because we're not getting that from ICE and we're not getting that from DHS. And even the folks over at Carolina Migrant Network, we're not getting firm numbers from them. And their information is based off of calls coming in. And some of those might be legit scary situations people find themselves in. And some might be miscommunication. So you asked for numbers here, and I have not seen anything that would give us a good indication of how often this is really, really happening, and how widespread it is, and even necessarily who's doing it.
Well, we'll keep our eye on it because it's going to be ongoing, as the Carolina Migrant Network and ICE has said. They're not going anywhere. They're going to continue their operations. Ashley, data centers are popping up everywhere, and in their wake are concerns about increasing demands on municipal water supplies and an uptick in prices for electricity because they use an enormous amount of electricity, and that dries up costs for ratepayers. And now Duke Energy is seeking permission to develop new fossil fuel resources to meet that growing demand. I thought they were trying to move away from fossil fuels. Why this move?
Yeah, so Duke has said that there's so much demand that they have in their pipeline. They've attributed that both to population growth as well as the demand from big users like data centers. But the governor has a task force that's been looking at power and energy, and it kind of determined recently that about 80% of Duke Energy's projected energy demand is coming from data centers. So I think it's safe to say that a lot of the new demand is coming from data centers. There's some 6 megawatts in the pipeline right now, which could power some 5 million homes. So just for perspective, I mean, these centers do take a large amount of power requirement. So a lot of what Duke is asking for is delaying the retirement of some of its, fossil fuel kind of facilities, as well as new natural gas plants to supplant some of this. And they're saying this will come, this will be lower rate increases for customers as a result. But it also, like to your point, it delays a lot of their clean energy goals and their stated mission of moving away from some of these fossil fuels.
This seems to be happening like that. Why was this on the horizon? Were power companies aware of this 5 years ago, 8 years ago, or was this just overnight? We need these new this new capacity.
Well, I would say it's definitely not 5 years ago. It's definitely come up a lot faster in the last year or two with AI especially.
We have a little more to talk about when it comes to this request for more fossil fuel production of electric power when we come back. It's Charlotte Talks.
On the next Charlotte Talks, the rise of sports gambling. 2 years ago, American sports betting increased by nearly 30%. Journalist Danny Funt investigated what he calls one of the most consequential and least scrutinized shifts in American sports, and says when it comes to sports gambling, everybody loses. He joins us to explain Monday at 9 on 90.7 WFAE.
Join WFAE on Thursday, April 16th for the 3rd Annual Carolinas Climate Summit at the Dubois Center in Uptown Charlotte. The day-long event will feature experts, officials, and community advocates speaking on topics such as climate solutions, the intersection of AI and climate change, disaster recovery across the Carolinas, and youth-driven climate action. Tickets are available now at carolinasclimatesummit.org. Support for the Carolinas Climate Summit comes from the borough's Welcome Fund.
Support comes from All Kids Pediatric Dentistry, a dental practice focused on creating a welcoming environment by helping children feel comfortable and supported during dental visits. Information at akasmiles.com. And by Mazda of South Charlotte, pledging to help end child hunger in the Carolinas through ongoing support of Second Harvest Food Bank of Metrolina. Details about this initiative at mazdaofsouthcharlotte.com.
It's Charlotte Talks on the local news roundup on listener-funded 90.7 WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We are here with Ashley Fahey, managing editor of the Charlotte Ledger. Ben Thompson joins us. He's an anchor at WCNC TV. And Ryan Pitkin is the founder and editor of Queen City Nerve. We were talking just before the break about Duke Energy's request for the ability to linger with fossil fuels for a while longer to meet the increasing demand for electricity being brought on by these ever-expanding data centers that are hitting our area and around the country as well. The North Carolina Utilities Commission held its final public hearing on Duke's proposed carbon and resource plan here in Charlotte on Wednesday, and they heard from climate and environmental advocates. Rachel Radar was one of them.
We really just want clean, affordable, renewable energy sources.
So if permission is granted for Duke to develop these new fossil fuel resources, how much of an impact might that have on the environment, Ashley?
It's kind of hard to measure, but I think it's been pretty well demonstrated that these fossil fuels obviously do have a big impact on the environment. And I think the data center question alone has brought up a lot of concerns around how much power these use, what impact it will have on the environment, climate change, things of that nature. So kind of hard to say, but I think a lot of these environmental advocates are pushing for Duke to consider alternatives, even with all the new demand load that's coming online. And Duke has said it's considering some things, including a clean transition tariff, which means that data centers and other large kind of consumers of power would be required to develop some clean energy to help power their facilities, but it's just not probably going to be enough. I mean, like I said, these facilities are really powerful. They require a lot, and we are growing as a state. I mean, our residential demand is going up. They're not using as much power, of course, but all these things kind of just, add up.
So even if they are permitted to develop new fossil fuel resources, electricity prices will still rise. By Duke Energy's own admission, Duke spokesperson Bill Norton.
Rates are still going up, but they're going to go up much less.
Yeah. I keep asking this question, and I can't seem to get an answer. So I'll ask it of you, Ashley. If data centers need more power and the power companies have to expand capacity in order to provide it, why are ratepayers, residential ratepayers, the ones footing the bill at all, even 1 penny of it? Why isn't it all going to these mega companies that are owned by oligarchical rich people paying the freight on what they need for power?
Well, that's what a lot of these advocates are saying, right? Like, why won't these big tech companies and others foot the bill? And the policy in North Carolina is kind of being worked through. I think that's why the governor has this task force to kind of determine what the policy might look like for these big users of power. Other states have required utilities to put up collateral and do other things before they agree and give approval to data center development, making sure that those companies are the ones taking on much more of the cost. But right now, we don't know what that's going to look like specifically for Duke. Duke has said that contracts with large electricity users require them to pay the full cost of setting up their facilities to the grid. But there's concern that that's not necessarily going to happen in actuality. So a lot of advocates are calling for more regulatory things, more oversight of these facilities, and just more transparency about who's paying for what.
So when will the Utilities Commission make a decision on this?
Well, so I think they had their final hearing. I don't know exactly when we'll know for sure, but they're looking at this. They're looking at the resource plan. I'm sure in the coming months we'll learn more.
So Family Dollar, which was a homegrown company until it was purchased several years ago by Dollar Tree and then sold again last year to a private equity consortium, announced this week that they would be closing their distribution center in Matthews. 373 people will be laid off. Why is this happening, Ashley?
Yeah, so Family Dollar's been on an interesting journey since it did sell to Dollar Tree in 2018. Last year, Dollar Tree sold it again to private equity. But before that even happened, when it was under Dollar Tree ownership, they closed a lot of Family Dollar stores across the country. I mean, I can't remember the exact count, but it might have been in the ballpark of 1,000 stores. So logically, you think there's fewer stores, there's fewer need for distribution centers to meet those demands because there's fewer stores to have to supply. So that's probably one reason. But when we look at the broader economy, there's a lot of uncertainty right now with consumer spending, and I think the lower end of the segment gets hit hardest, and those are the customers going to a Family Dollar store. So the company,
and they need those stores all the more.
Right, exactly. But the company hasn't said exactly why they're closing this distribution center. But again, I just think fewer stores might require fewer distribution centers.
So these layoffs evidently will come in stages. The first will be in May, the second in August of this year. And this is the second largest number of layoffs in the state this year. Is this strictly because the company, because of their internal financials, or is this a comment on the broad economy at large?
It's hard to say with one example because, I was kind of looking at the WARN notices filed so far this year, and I haven't really seen a pattern per se as far as distribution centers or retail specifically. But again, you got to think about that lower income consumer and how they kind of get the short end of the stick whenever there's an economic uncertainty. And so I think that's an important point in all this, but I don't know if we can extrapolate that from one example.
Winthrop University economist Dr. Nicholas Molman speculates that economic uncertainty, which you mentioned a second ago, and low profit margins may be a factor, as well as the fact that labor costs have risen. Are they paying the workers at Family Dollar substantially more than they paid them 2 years ago?
Well, I think it's no secret that retail workers don't make a lot of money. I mean, the hourly pay, I don't know exactly what it is at Family Dollar today, but a lot of retailers have had to raise wages, though, to be competitive, just because it is a very tight labor market. And that you can't really raise prices too much at a place like Family Dollar. That's a very price sensitive consumer. So, that could certainly be a factor on all this.
Well, Sycamore Brewing went through some tough times in the aftermath of their former owner being arrested and charged with child rape charges. Their products were removed from lots of grocery store shelves, bars, and restaurants removed their products from their menus and their taps, and then their tap room in South End closed. But last weekend, after the company was sold and the name was changed, they opened again. What was turnout like, Ryan?
I believe Ashley may have been there, but it looks pretty packed
Okay.
from the photos I've seen.
Then Ashley, if you were there, mug in hand, what was it like?
Well, I will say the ledger was there. Our business development director happened to be there, and she took some videos for us. But it was wall to wall people. The patio was packed. The interiors you couldn't barely get through. It looked like from the video. It looked like a pre-December 2025 day at Sycamore, even though of course it's now Club West Brewing. So it seemed like it was the first day back. It was St. Patrick's Day weekend. It was good weather. That all could have played a part in it, but you wouldn't have known about the controversy just looking at the activity in that day of that establishment.
The brewery, the beer, and the tap room are now called Club West Brewing, as you have alluded to. The Observer sent a reporter as well to scout the reopening and to talk to customers. And according to the article in the Observer, most of the customers declined to talk to them about this, but those who did had a variety of opinions. Some expressed support for the employees whose jobs were at risk if they did not reopen, and some people commented online that the reopening was disgusting. Will most people feel that way, or will this name change and the new ownership erase that? I mean, it's a different company now. It's a allegedly different product, or at least the name slapped on the label is different. Is this something people will get over? Can they recapture the former glory that was Sycamore?
I think a big tell, Mike, is going to be the distribution because I think that's where a lot of Sycamore, now Club West, of course, business came from, was the sales they did from grocery stores and other retailers. Obviously, their tap room is important, and I think seeing them crowded on their first day is maybe a sign that things could look up for them. But I think they lost a lot of distribution deals when the controversy happened and the arrest happened and everything. So will Sycamore Club West Brewing now return to grocery store shelves? I think is going to be a big indication.
Do you want to jump in there, Ben? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the distinction for some people, I think evidently the person they sold it to was former director of operations there. And I think mentally, is that enough of a separation for people, some of the people you cited in the Observer, to give them enough grace to be like, okay, that's enough of a distance for me? Or I think some people, those quotes that you just read, feel like, no, something's still not right. This still feels like this might be part of that same group of people, and we don't want to go. Then the question becomes, how much is enough? I mean, you are talking about a lot of people employed there. You are talking about a huge chunk of real estate in the middle of the South, and that nobody wants to see dormant. So that's sort of the distinction I see.
Yeah. And they also had another, I think, an expansion tap room on their schedule for very quickly, and I think that's been canceled now. So we'll keep our eye on that. Citigroup Technology, a division of the global financial giant Citi, debuted their new digs in Ballantyne on Monday, and Governor Josh Stein was there.
This creates hundreds of new opportunities for the talented people of North Carolina to thrive. And it's another sign that Charlotte continues to grow as this country's second largest financial center in the entire United States.
So we just spoke about layoffs at Family Dollar. This will allegedly be a job creator. Ashley, how many jobs are slated to be created?
Yeah, I mean, it could get up to 800 or 900 in total. They're going to add 510 to what they have now, which is getting close to 400. But to your point, Mike, I think it just shows how certain sectors of the economy are doing a lot better than others right now. And financial services, especially in a place like Charlotte, seems to be holding on pretty strong.
How many of these jobs will be filled by people who already work for Citigroup elsewhere and will transfer in? And how many of them will be available for locals here?
That's a good question. I don't think they've necessarily delineated that, but you are just seeing this trend of folks, even in a place like New York, which is where Citi is based, being willing to relocate to a place like Charlotte. Your money obviously goes a lot farther. There's more of a willingness you see now for folks to kind of transfer, but I would imagine a good percentage of the jobs would be available to people here too.
Ben?
Yeah, I think average salary is 130,000 for these jobs. I think it's interesting because I think some of these big banks outside of Bank of America, Wells, now True-Liant, sort of avoided a Charlotte. And I think they now realize this is not a city they can avoid anymore. I spoke to Jamie Dimon last year when he was here because Chase was opening up a branch in South Park. And I said, what are you doing here? This is Bank of America territory. This is Wells Fargo territory. What are you doing here? And he said as much. He's like, we can't afford to ignore Charlotte anymore as a market. We have to be here. They already have, I think, 500 jobs here in their investment sector, but also they're adding branches as well. You also see Huntington Bank, you see Fifth Third Bank. Honestly, it reminds me of 2017 and the grocery store wars here in Charlotte. We had only had Harris Teeter for decades and Food Lion and things like that. And all of a sudden, here comes Publix, and then here comes Trader Joe's, and then here comes Whole Foods. And wait up, here comes Wegmans.
When?
I know, right?
It's under construction.
Yeah, it's coming.
Well, explain to me why. Is it because we have why can't they ignore Charlotte? Bank of America is serving us, Wells Fargo is serving us, we have PNC, we have Chase, we have all these other banks, Truist, smaller banks that have come in recently, Town Bank, which is a specialty bank for, I guess, high dollar investors. I don't know who it's for. I just see their commercials and they look wealthy. Why can't you ignore Charlotte? Do we need branch banking? And this isn't a branch bank. This is a whole different area of banking.
Well, speaking for the corporate positions, I think the more banks you have here and the more banking talent you have, you could steal from other banks, like I think that's the competition, right? And so you have such a labor force here that has the talent and the skill sets and the experience. I mean, the jobs at Citi are like risk and fintech has become so big in Charlotte, and those folks are here whether they work at Bank of America or other banks. So there's this kind of cluster here of people where you could like offer a more competitive salary and try to poach folks from other banks or the education system. These are things that are oftentimes cited, and we get kind of tired of hearing about them maybe, but it's true. I mean, this is why companies make big investments and move here, is because they think they can hire for those positions.
And you mentioned, Ben, that these jobs will pay around $140,000 a year, which is a third more than the average salary. The average salary in Charlotte is $90,706. Citi has been investing in Charlotte through 4 affordable housing projects, and at the opening event on Monday, they made a $50,000 donation and promised 500 volunteer hours to Nourish Up, which used to be called Loaves and Fishes. Did that play any role in Mecklenburg County providing a $375,000 tax incentive for them to locate that thing in Ballantyne?
I'm not sure that it did. Ben, I don't know if you had thoughts.
No, I certainly don't know any specific information, but I think anytime you see a big corporate entity come to Charlotte, that's part of the buy-in. You're expected to do those sorts of things. City leaders like that. They want to tout that. They don't want to just tout jobs, but they want to say, hey, they're going to be investing in the community and they're going to build parks and they're going to do all these feel-good things. And I think that's sort of the price of admission now.
So Charlotte's new police chief, Estella Patterson, has been on the job now for about 100 days, and she marked that moment by pointing to progress in crime reduction and speaking about the need to strengthen partnerships across the city and the county. What progress, Ben, has been made in crime reduction in these last 100 days?
I think one of her sort of like crown jewels of what she feels good about and what she's touting is a program called Queen City Safe. It's sort of high visibility, strict focus on a certain problem areas around town. It mainly started off as uptown, and now it's gone to other areas around town. In the first couple of months of the year, they've had 250 traffic stops, 84 citations, 50 arrests, about 24 firearms, and then a bunch of narcotics as well taken. And I think that the chief is also, as anybody would in that situation, benefiting from just being new on the job. And I think a lot of people, fair or not, don't leave it to me to decide. A lot of people thought the last chief was controversial, or they had issues with him, or there was baggage with him. Again, I'm not the person to say that, but I think she's benefiting when it comes to her interaction with other city leaders and civic leaders as being a new face and a fresh approach. And I think that's helping her.
So are these approaches fresh, or are they a continuation of what came before? In other words, she's been on the job for 100 days, which is a little over 3 months, and Queen City Safe, is that a project of hers, or is that a continuation of something that was already in place?
It's a new program that started in just the last few months. And I mean, if you asked, is this revolutionizing, community involved policing? I don't know that people would say that, but and listen, also she's talking about things like improving officer morale and retention and recruit. I mean, some of the same things that we've talked about for a long time. These are not new problems, but you do have a new person taking a new approach on some of them.
Well, when we come back, some folks took a walk in McCrory Heights this week because that's what's one of the neighborhoods that might be impacted by adding toll lanes to I-77 as they head through the uptown area. And that project, of course, is on a 3-month hold because of neighbors on the west side saying, wait a minute, we're not sure that we want this. We'll talk about what that walk may have shown leaders, and we'll talk about some CMS news as well. When we come back, it's Charlotte Talks on WFAE.
Coming up in 20 minutes, the latest on the war in Iran. Oklahoma U.S. Senator Markwayne Mullin's Department of Homeland Security confirmation hearing saw him clash with his fellow senators. And a federal judge ruled this week that Voice of America must reinstate more than 1,000 employees after the Trump administration placed them on leave last year. Those stories and more on the 1A News Roundup at 10.
Hi, it's Steve Inskeep.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. You may have heard that prices for used vehicles are up. That car you've been thinking about donating to this station?
That car could be worth hundreds of dollars or even more in support.
If you don't need it, donate it. It's easy, it's free to you, and the proceeds help us bring you the news.
Learn more on this station's website.
Get started today at WFAE.org/cars.
Support comes from St. Peter's Episcopal Church Williamson Lectures, welcoming former mayor of Charlotte and previous U.S. Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox on Thursday, April 23rd. Tickets available March 23rd. WilliamsonLectures.org. And by Monarch, a statewide organization connecting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to employment opportunities. Interested employers can learn more at monarchnc.org/supported employment.
It's Charlotte Talks and the local news roundup on listener-funded 90.7 WFAE and WFAE.org. I'm Mike Collins. We're here with Ryan Pitkin, founder and editor of Queen City News. Ben Thompson is an anchor for WCNC TV. Ashley Fahey, managing editor of the Charlotte Ledger. And in a moment, we'll hear from James Farrell, our education reporter for WFAE News. Before he comes on, NCDOT proposals for new I-77 toll lanes through Uptown are on a 3-month pause, as I mentioned a moment ago, because of concerns about the impact those lanes may have on West Side neighborhoods, including McCrory Heights. And this week, the neighborhood hosted a community walk to give people a first-hand look at how infrastructure projects have already affected that area. Ben, who took part in that walk?
This was Sustain Charlotte was the organization that sort of hosted it and started it, but I actually saw them. They were out last night. I'd say it was a couple of dozen people who were walking the neighborhood, and I think it's I mean, for our viewers, your listeners, it's one thing to say, hey, this is a neighborhood that's been really impacted. I think their point is once you walk the streets and you see Brookshire Boulevard, where there was once an entire street. And then you walk to the east in that neighborhood, past Creek and a few others, and you see I-77, where there was once neighborhood. You get a much better feeling of like, oh wow, like this neighborhood really has been carved up. If you can go to an overhead map of it, 1950 something between now and it's not even recognizable because Brookshire took half the neighborhood. And I-77 took another half of the neighborhood. I've spoken to neighbors there who remember some of the houses being taken up off the ground and taken like 3 miles north up to Hyde Park. I've told the story of a man who still lives there today, 100 years old, and says this neighborhood used to be, home to the best cul-de-sac in the city of Charlotte, and it was torn out. No matter how you feel about it, once you walk the streets of a neighborhood and you get to see a big, huge retaining wall that now carries thousands of cars a day for the Brookshire Boulevard, and people used to live where that retaining wall is, it kind of gets real.
Well, people might say that the Brookshire Boulevard and I-77 were put in decades ago. Has the healing not occurred? Have the neighborhoods not reformed and reshaped to reflect the new reality of those highways? And it hasn't?
Not even close. I mean, and I mean, it's a fair question, Mike, but I mean, I know this intimately. Like, again, there are people, there's a gentleman on Patton Avenue there. He's 100 years old. He has watched every last bit of it unfold. He might be the exception. However, you have, for one, you've got a couple of people in there still, and they're dwindling in numbers, but you have a couple of other people in there who it might not be them, but they remember growing up in that neighborhood, and they know it's not the same as it was, and they remember what their parents went through when their neighbors had to move their house or get their house torn down. So, I mean, there are a lot of long-time people in that neighborhood. It's to think that they have moved on is to not understand the problem.
So you've got that to consider. You've got the fact that we tore down Brooklyn, the Brooklyn neighborhood in uptown Charlotte, which is in Second Ward, and it's where the government center is, and the Aqua Center, and all that good stuff is now, and it's never been redeveloped. In fact, Brooklyn Village has been on the books to be redeveloped for years now, and not the first shovel has not been turned. So you've got all that to consider. And then county leaders pointed out last week that 4 greenways and 11 parks could be affected by these toll lanes, including the elimination altogether of Wilmore Park. Sustain Charlotte, as you mentioned, Ben, has been at the forefront of complaining about this or hitting this point home with leaders. And they're also pointing to the potential of water and air quality degradation. Of course, they're fighting some powerful forces here. The business community, the development community, NCDOT, among others. Could things like this walk have any impact at all?
In the long term, no. They just won't. I mean, I think what this all is going to come down to, I spoke to both Malcolm Graham yesterday and I talked to Ed Driggs about this yesterday, both city councilmen at length. And even though they approach the issue from slightly different perspectives, Malcolm Graham said, McCrory Heights and neighborhoods like that, I'm with you. Keep the pressure on, get those concessions, get meaningful improvements. This is the way you go about it. Black political caucus, keep your lawsuit. But he also admits at some point you're going to have to get real and realize there's going to probably be a compromise, and we're going to have to find which concessions we can fight for, because then, as Ed Driggs will tell you when I talk to him, you're talking about billions of dollars on the line. The train has left the station. Like, I don't know too many people. There are people. I don't know too many city leaders who, when they're being honest and candid, say, stop it. We're not doing it. I just don't know, given our explosive growth, given the traffic that we already see, given the pollution we already see, I don't know too many people who are saying, just stop the project, don't do it.
Right. Ryan.
Should be noted that Governor Stein, for the first time, finally addressed this yesterday and said that he approves the pause. Now, opposition to the project has said that the pause is not good enough. All they're doing is collecting more community engagement, and then they're going to move forward like they were going to 3 months from now. But it's just worth noting because Stein hadn't spoken about this yet up until yesterday, or maybe the day before. I know it was reported yesterday. And just the fact that people have said that he is the one with the power, that if he wanted to, if there's one man with the power to stop this, it would be him. Not to say that he ever plans to do so, but he is at least now addressing it publicly for the first time and saying that he supports the community.
Okay. We had some severe weather race through here on Monday, including an EF0 tornado, the weakest tornado, but still a touchdown, and it caused some damage just north of uptown. Thomas Weinset is with the National Weather Service.
When we see this kind of loss of roofing material, it wasn't the entire roof peeled back, but it was just portions of it. So that indicates a fairly weaker tornado. So if more portions of the roofing material was removed, or if we saw additional structural damage, that would lead to a higher rating. But given the degree of damage, it was on the lower end, so that led to the EF0 85 mile per hour rating.
Okay, there were some high winds and heavy rains, and about 1,100 people lost power in some areas during that storm, which leads me to bring in WFAE's education reporter, James Farrell, because that weather incident led to schools closing, I believe, on Monday. We've had a wide variety of weather that has impacted CMS schools this year, but this week they announced some good news, at least from a student's perspective. James, makeup days for weather, they're not doing them.
Yeah, that's right. They still don't have to do them. Superintendent Crystal Hill can waive up to 4 days per board policy. This was the fourth that they've waived. If you go back to January, when they had those 2 weeks of closures, delayed openings, remote learning from the snowstorms that had happened. And I think this kind of highlights the way that this has changed, especially since COVID. The state now allows school districts to take up to 5 remote learning days. And that's given them a little more flexibility to kind of like work with things, because they've used 3 of those at this point. So they still have 2 remote learning days left. They also used some delayed openings in there back in January as well. So they still have some wiggle room here. I mean, I think some parents might kind of point to the remote learning days and question whether it's an adequate replacement for a real instructional time. And certainly that was a big debate during COVID. But I think that's what's kind of allowed them to have this flexibility without needing to use those makeup days.
So you filed this. The reason these makeup days and these educational days are important is because they're trying to meet goals at CMS, and you filed a series of reports recently about CMS literacy scores, because raising those scores has been a big focus across the state and within CMS. After writing about Goal 1, which focuses on improving K through 2 reading scores, and Goal 2, which aims at boosting reading scores in grades 3 through 8, this week you looked at Goal 3, which calls for increasing the percentage of students scoring career and college ready on state Math 1 exams. What is the goal the system set for itself?
Yeah, so the goal it's to increase the percentage of students who are scoring, like you mentioned, at the career college ready level, which is if you score 4 or 5 in the test, the 2 highest scores you could possibly get, from 27% as of June 2023 to 57% by June 2029.
So you say that they have their work cut out for them. It will be an uphill climb, and you say they are falling behind. So is the goal realistic?
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit sobering. You know, the school board goes over this data at length every school board meeting, so you can kind of stay up to date. And when they've done these reports on the reading scores in the past, sometimes the narrative that you hear is that they're increasing scores. It's not quite hitting the annual targets they set to get to the goal, but they're still increasing it. Here in the math scores, there was a little bit more stagnation. We've only seen Math 1 score, the percentage of students scoring college career ready increased by 2 percentage points in the last 2 years. It's only at 29% right now. The target this year was, target last year was 37%. So they're well below that target to stay on pace towards that goal. And it's also a little bit more concerning when you look at high school specifically, because Math 1 is a high school exam, but there are 8th graders who take it kind of as advanced students. Those students are doing much better. They're scoring somewhere, there's like 70% or so that are at career and college level ready. But the high school scores have been stagnating at around 9% at that level for the last 3 years. You know, it's definitely going to be a big, you know, Superintendent Hill called it a Herculean effort to meet those goals, which is how she describes the goals quite a bit, because they're pretty ambitious goals. But in this case, you see a lot more stagnation than you do on the reading side.
There has been a steady creep of money into athletics at the college level, and it's now reached middle and high school. You report that students at that level from both Carolinas gathered at Second Ward High School recently for a showcase for athletes and to provide opportunities for financial advice on name, image, and likeness programs, these NIL deals for high school athletes. High school athletes. This is about companies sponsoring these young people. How?
Yeah, well, that's a good question that I think a lot of these athletes had as well, is they're kind of excited about the opportunity to do this. This is a newer opportunity for high school students in North Carolina. It started last year. It had actually gone back and forth for a while. The State Board of Education did not want to move forward with it initially, but then there was a student in Greensboro who had filed a lawsuit because they had a deal on the line that was north of $1 million. And they ultimately won their lawsuit, and that kind of forced the state to move forward with that in this past year. We've seen this at the college level for the past few years, starting in 2021, and now it's expanding to high school. One of the students I spoke to said that he does see like kind of brands on Instagram that are, you know, maybe looking for these kinds of opportunities with the right student athletes. But last year there were only 12 students who took advantage of this or who had this opportunity come. So it's not super widespread at the high school level, at least not yet. The athletes I spoke to said they love the opportunity, but it has not come up yet. It's not something they're thinking about on a day-to-day basis.
I know I'm a dinosaur waiting to die, but you just used the word only, and you used that in your reporting on this. Only 12 students took advantage. I'm surprised any students were allowed to take advantage of this. They're in middle school. They're in high school. What do these companies hope to get out of this? Are they just influencers? Is that what this is?
I think in some cases that can be the case. And in what we've seen so far at the high school level, it's not what you hear about maybe at the college level. There was that one deal I mentioned that had north of $1 million on the line, but but all the other ones were for smaller amounts. The state board had said at the time that there was like a couple for like $10,000. And then some of it is just like kind of the monetary value of whatever item that or athletic gear or, you know, energy drink or whatever that the student might be endorsing.
Okay, so I've just a few seconds left, but you say that CMS has identified $37.1 million in needs for this upcoming budget cycle. Is that much more than they requested last year from the county, or is that about the same?
It's a little bit more. Last year, they had identified $28 million in new costs. I'm not sure if that included the the carryover funds for charter schools that the district has to pay. So I'm not entirely sure. We're going to get a better idea on the concrete numbers this Tuesday. Superintendent Crystal Hill is planning on releasing her final budget recommendation for board consideration. We'll kind of kick off that project. We'll get all the hard numbers. We'll be able to compare it a little bit better.
$8.8 million of that will go to 5% in teacher raises on average. But you also say that CMS is being cautious in light of uncertainty at the federal level and plans to hire 200 fewer employees to adjust to an enrollment drop. That drop means less money coming in from the state for public schools. Is it a wash? Does fewer students mean less money needed?
The school district would say no, because a lot of times when you see these enrollment drops, it's not like all of a sudden all of those are from one school and now you hire one less teacher at that school. Those fixed costs of facilities, those are all still there, and that's a concern that you often hear from these school districts.
James Farrell's WFAE's education reporter. Thank you. March Madness is underway, and here is an example of why they call it March Madness.
9 seconds. Boyd wants it inside. Drive, 6 seconds. Blocked! Boyd! Blocked! Draw the glass slipper! It's a Cinderella story in Portland, Oregon! Oh, what a feeling! For the first time in program history!
Yeah, Jimmy! 1.6 left! 1.6!
Oh, my God! Big time block from Aquino!
Oh, this is not real, Jim. This is
real.
Not real.
That's a radio call from the final play as High Point Student Radio did the play-by-play on the 12th-seeded High Point upset of 5th-seeded Wisconsin on Thursday. Queen's University is also in the big dance for the first time in its history. They're sending their basketball team to the NCAA Tournament. The Royals were a force in Division II. They've proven they can be a force in Division I. They will be the 15th seed, Ryan, and will play number 2 seed Purdue tonight. Do they have a shot?
It's March, Mike, so anything can happen, but I wouldn't put a lot of money on it.
Oh, come on. You a party pooper.
I wouldn't put all my NIL funds on it. Let's say that.
Okay. Well, Queens coach Grant Leonard acknowledged the team is an underdog, but they will focus on what they do well, and they will not worry about any deficits they may have.
For us, it's always been about, staying true to our process. And these guys have been unbelievable with it. And, hey, believe we're here. And a lot of people outside of our room might not have believed this was possible, but here we are.
Leonard thinks Queens has a shot. He mentioned that in 2023, Fairleigh Dickinson became just the second 16 seed in history to defeat a number 1 seed when they beat Purdue.
The opponent doesn't matter. And if it would have been Duke, it would have been awesome. Because Greenville's close and a lot more fans probably would have been able to go, but it's Purdue, and that's awesome as well. And we're going to try and do what Fairleigh Dickinson did a few years ago when they upset Purdue.
So the game is tonight, 7:35 in St. Louis at the Enterprise Center. You can watch it on True TV.
I'm rooting for them, for the record. I'm rooting for them for the record. All right.
True TV, if you can find it. I'm not sure where that is. And Sirius XM Radio. Well, it's on cable somewhere, I think. Ashley Fahey, Ben Thompson, Ryan Pitkin, James Farrell. Thank you all for the hour.
Charlotte Talks is a production of 90.7 WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from Mazda of South Charlotte. Our executive producer is Gabe Altieri. The senior producer is Sarah D'Elia. The producer is Chris Jones. For more information on